your sugar is being stored. And we all only have so much space we can store our sugar before we have it spill into the blood. It's kind of like a suitcase filled with clothes. You can stuff your clothes in there. You can overpack for a trip, but at some point you can only stuff so much clothing into that suitcase before it starts spilling out onto your bed, onto the floor, into the TSA check line.
Hey, welcome to the Diabetes Remission Roadmap podcast with the two renegade pharmacists, Brian Bisher and Cory Jenks. You are listening to this because you are a person with type 2 diabetes who is committed and driven to breaking free from this diagnosis and creating a real, meaningful change in your health and life. In these episodes, we're here to help you ditch the scripts with doses of unconventional wisdom on topics such as fitness, nutrition, medication, mindset, and more. So without any further delay, let's dive right in. Hey, welcome to the third episode of our Diabetes Remission Roadmap podcast. Here with Cory again today, and we are going to define what is diabetes, because this is the Diabetes Remission Roadmap podcast. And I think we've yet to really define what diabetes is, right, Cory? So let's inform people.
Yeah, we really have done a lot of telling people about ourselves, remission versus management. If you haven't checked those two episodes out, they're worthwhile listening to. You get to know us, but to defeat your enemy, which is diabetes, we got to know our enemy. And so on this episode, we're going to actually define what diabetes is. We're going to give you some lab markers to make sense of maybe if you've been to the doctor or if you've ordered your own labs and are trying to figure this out on your own. A lot of people are taking their health into their own hands, which can be great or it could be terrifying if you don't have the right shepherd to get you through this. But diabetes, and we're going to split this off right now too, because there's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
quickly type 1, and then we're going to move on because this really they're totally different diseases. And I honestly think they should be called different things. But type 1 diabetes is usually an autoimmune issue with your pancreas where you stop making insulin, insulin being the hormone that lowers your blood sugar, takes sugar out of your blood, puts it into the cells. In type 1 diabetes, you have an issue with your pancreas and you don't make insulin and your sugar is high. All right, that's type 1, usually happens in kids or young adults. Type 2 diabetes is typically, or used to be, a much more chronic adult onset situation where you have what is called insulin resistance, where your insulin is a hormone that, again, takes the sugar, gets it out of your blood into your cells. And over time, your body becomes resistant to it, and your sugar's high in your blood. And there's a association typically with being overweight. And so type 1 diabetes, disease of not enough insulin. Type 2 diabetes, a disease of too much insulin that your body isn't even listening to. And Brian's going to correct me and I think make some tweaks as to what I said. He's got the look on his face that says,
Yeah.
Cory, you could have done that better.
I think it could be a little more concise, but that's all right. I think it was a good overview. And yes, Cory is right. Where type 1, basically, we're not really going to talk about type 1 on this podcast in terms of, because you cannot cure it. It is just you have to have insulin. But type 2, there is a road to getting off injections and insulin. And that's what we really want to talk about, how you can do that. But first, like Cory said, you have to understand what is going on in the background. First, Cory, I'm going to define just give people some numbers if that's all right. Like what numbers they should be looking out for. So
You
your
have my permission,
doctor,
Brian. Yeah, it's
yeah,
okay. You have my
yeah,
permission.
cool. So your doctor probably has said, "Hey, I'm going to check an A1C," and this is just a measure of your average blood sugar over the last 2 to 3 months. And an A1C level of 6.5% or higher on two separate tests indicates diabetes. And before that, so you're looking at pre-diabetes. This doesn't just happen overnight typically. So if you're in the range of 5.7 to 6.4, that is like a pre-diabetic level and still considered at risk and likely going to progress to diabetes if nothing is done. So, and if we're looking at some strict blood sugar numbers here, we're talking about a diabetes blood sugar in the morning, fasting level before you eat anything of 126 or above. And pre-diabetes, you get in that range of like 100 to 125. So those are some numbers here to look at that your doctor might throw at you. It's just so you can comprehend what they're talking about. Cory, you got anything to add on the specific numbers?
I think that when it comes to the specific numbers, one, the fact that one's expressed as a percent and the other is expressed in milligrams per deciliter here in the United States is often confusing to patients because if you get a blood sugar monitor or a continuous glucose monitor, you're looking at that in the moment blood sugar. of milligrams per deciliter. That A1C, as we said, it's expressed as a percent, and it's measuring average blood sugar over a number of months. So sometimes we got to break things down in a more basic way, but just know that like a percent of 6.5 seems very different than a blood sugar of 100. What's going on there? Just know that these values are different. The other thing I'll say about the numbers is if you heard some numbers there in the pre-diabetes range, that is time to take action too. Our healthcare system, unfortunately, will tell you you have pre-diabetes and then work, the doctor will say in their 3 minutes with you, work on it, diet, exercise, whatever that might be. And then you come back and then you have diabetes. And now it's time to take action. But the reality is, even in the pre-diabetic range, there is damage happening to your body. The high blood sugar is a problem because it is causing damage to your organs, to your blood vessels, your eyes, your kidneys, your heart. And really, the diabetes problem here is that it's causing this silent damage to your body that's going to make life much more difficult for you down the road. But as Brian said, type 2 is typically a slow process over a number of years, although unfortunately we're seeing this happen in children now. So it's happening much more rapidly. Um,
Yeah, it can definitely the process can definitely get sped up by the processed food. And I wanted to add something here because I think it's important for people to understand when you are one monitoring your blood sugar and if you have diabetes already and you're checking it and your doctor checked your A1C, let's say it was like 9. Okay. So now you're like scared, you're gonna make all these changes, you're gonna cut out carbs completely, and then you maybe even wear a CGM and you're like, okay, great. Like I'm gonna
CGM being a
Oh yeah,
continuous glucose
continuous
monitor.
glucose monitor. Yeah, great. Way to correct me, Corey. So you're wearing one of those and you make some changes and already in like a couple weeks you are seeing your blood sugars go down. And this is great because your body is starting to clear out the excess sugar. And now these continuous glucose monitors, they will give you a predicted GMI. So this GMI percent is going to be different than your A1C. So the GMI is just looking at the like a predicted A1C value that is going to be probably lower than what you would actually get on an A1C test because the A1C goes much further back than this GMI. So expect differences in there. Don't get discouraged. I've seen some people get discouraged when their doctor checks their A1C and their GMI predicted it would be lower, but it wasn't. Just keep it up. Don't go on to the A1C is my point here, Corey. And I wanted to add something to do with how does diabetes do damage because I think this is really important just to understand the process that's going on. The sugar literally sticks to your cells and it goes to the proteins and makes them all discombobulated. So they're not functioning as well as they're supposed to. And so that's why it can just wreak havoc on your whole body, your eyes, your nerves, your kidneys, everything can just get kind of torn up and it's not really functioning the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, imagine spilling a jar of maple syrup onto the inside of a watch. It's going to stick. Literally, it's like your body everything is going to be more sticky inside your body. You're not going to have as good of healing of wounds. That's a huge problem with diabetes. But now, Brian, we're going down the road of diabetes complications. We're going to scare people with those in another episode. We're
That's
still
true.
trying to define type 2 diabetes. So we talked about the lab values and what Brian's going to do, because he's the king uh, editor of this podcast, is we can include a link to a chart which will show you A1C to average blood sugar. And this is something that I find is really powerful when we work with patients is like Brian mentioned an A1C of 9%. How do we equate that to like that number you're doing when you're checking your finger stick or your continuous glucose monitor? For example, an A1C of 9% would mean your average sugar is 212 milligrams per deciliter. So there's ways of equating it, and this is something that I really like to work with patients is taking those lab values and giving you what it means, what it can mean to you in the moment. So
Yeah.
so we've talked about the lab definition of type 2. Oh, Brian has a
No, I
thing to
just wanted
add.
to, we've talked about the lab, and I think Corey mentioned insulin resistance. So I want to define that. I also want to help people get this picture of what it means to have like this full tank. So let's talk about what is actually going on like in your body with type 2 diabetes. Does that sound good, Corey, to go down that route? Because people can Google A1Cs and get that average.
Mhm.
I'll definitely put a link in there for someone to do that. They give you the calculator, the tool. to do that. But let's actually give them what I think they will have a harder time understanding on their own, just searching Google.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's define insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. What's going on in your body? So essentially, as I mentioned, insulin is this hormone that your pancreas produces. And when you eat food or if you're stressed or not sleeping well, your blood sugar goes up. And our body likes what's called homeostasis. We like to keep things in a normal range, whether it's your blood sugar, your sodium, your potassium, any number of different things in your body. We want to keep it in a normal range. And blood sugar going too high, as Brian said, means that we're causing damage. So if, say, we drink a soda, which is essentially pure sugar, your body's going to release, unless it's a diet soda, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole of diet versus regular. So you drink a soda, your body says, uh-oh, we got a lot of sugar in here. Pancreas releases insulin, brings your blood sugar down to a normal level. Everyone's happy. The insulin takes the sugar from your blood vessels and puts it into your cells to either use as fuel or to be stored. Now, over the course of time, if you are consuming a lot of foods that raise your sugar, having a lot of stress, it's your body becomes sort of starts tuning out your insulin and thus has to produce more insulin to get the same effect for that can of soda. And over years and years, not only are we not having that same effect with the same amount of insulin for that specific amount of sugar in your body, but as I mentioned, your sugar is being stored, and we all only have so much space we can store our sugar before we have it spill into the blood. It's kind of like a suitcase filled with clothes. You can stuff your clothes in there. You can overpack for a trip, but at some point you can only stuff so much clothing into that suitcase before it starts spilling out onto your bed, onto the floor, into the TSA check line. So, in that metaphor, at that point, when the clothes are spilling out, or when your sugar is spilling out into your blood because there's no place to put it, we get that definition of diabetes.
Yeah.
Brian, clean that up for me.
Yeah, essentially the noise. Think of the someone yelling at you, "Hey, put those clothes back in." That is the insulin trying to tell your body to put the sugar back in the cell, but you're like, "I can't. There's nowhere to put this." So,
Mhm.
no matter how loud that person yells, it's just gonna be harder and harder to put that. There's no place to put it. So, think of that as like the signal, or another way to put it is think of like if you were surrounded by loud music, right? And you had all these sensors, what would you start to do? You would start to cover your ears. You would not want to hear the music. And that's what your body does. It's getting this loud signal from insulin, and it does not like to keep hearing that signal so loud. So it's like going to back down on the response. So that's really what insulin resistance comes down to. Type 2 diabetes is more of a problem of high insulin levels than high blood sugar. High blood sugar is the side effect. High insulin is really the problem here. And that goes down a whole nother thing of like, well, so why do they prescribe me insulin then? So that's a great question. And we'll definitely address that later in the podcast. I want you to be staying tuned for that. If you are on insulin, there is hope to getting off of this. I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah. So essentially, like you get to this point where there's sugar in your blood, and your doctor says, "Oh, you have diabetes," and this is where medications would start. And the way, I mean, we're two pharmacists, so diabetes medications work in a number of ways. As Brian said, you can overwhelm your system by adding more insulin in to lower your sugar. That is definitely a way to do it. It's not a way we like to do it, but it's a way to do it. There's medicines that will reduce the amount of sugar that your own body makes. There's medicines that will make your body more sensitive. It's almost like it tunes down that loud noise in your body, and it lets that insulin do a better job. There's medicines that tell your body to make more insulin. There's medicines that will literally make you pee out the extra sugar so that there's not as much floating around in your blood. So, and we'll do a deeper dive on medicines in another podcast. We're as pharmacists, we gotta dedicate a whole like show or three to that. But suffice to say, like once you hit this point, you have sugar in the blood, damage occurring, you're you're insulin resistant, and there's a problem. And so this is where we would like to come in and discuss how we can reverse this process, right, Brian? There's a
Yeah.
root cause here, and there's a way to reverse it. And are we going to tell folks that like right now on this episode?
No, not yet on this episode because I think
Oh,
they.
Brian, oh, we're
Oh,
teasing people. That's
oh,
I'm
yeah.
so
The
sorry,
next
folks.
episode
Yeah.
that'll come out very soon. The I think to really give you a visual of this, I draw this for patients all the time. Actually, I'm going to stop saying patients because I think patients inherently means they don't do anything. Let's just call you guys. You guys are, I help my clients.
Humans, the
Humans,
humans. Yeah, the
people.
humans you take
Yes.
care. We don't do cats or dogs, sorry.
Yeah.
This is
No
the
cats or
human
dogs.
diabetes remission. Yeah.
But I break it down into storage tank. So you have to control what is going into this tank, right? Your body stores energy. That's the sugar. And there's an
So
output.
sugar is the energy.
Yes. Sugar is the energy.
And it is stored as something called glycogen. So the storage version of sugar or glucose is glycogen. And you mentioned a storage tank. Our storage tank in our body is going to be muscles and somewhat around our liver.
Yeah. So those are the two storage tanks where your body can store the extra sugar. And this is also something, just a little side note, I think that blows people's mind to put it in perspective to how much sugar is in your blood. Corey, do you know how much sugar is in your blood at any given time in terms of teaspoons?
How much you need as a minimum to live
Well,
as
no, but like at any given time when your blood sugar is, say, 90, do you know how much sugar is in your blood in terms of tablespoons, teaspoons,
I'm gonna
cups?
make I'm gonna make a guess and you're gonna correct me, but I think it's like a teaspoon of sugar.
It is a teaspoon of sugar. That is correct. So just picture that. Now obviously that is constantly being recycled. Your brain is using it up, your liver is pushing more out. But at any given time, there is a teaspoon of sugar that your body likes to have in your blood. And anything above that is really going to be more toxic. So that's why this whole process, it's really pretty cool how well controlled it is, how our bodies, our brain senses our digestive system. But just to give you perspective, when you're looking at how many teaspoons are in that cookie, how many teaspoons are in this cake, and you're just overloading your body. So you're putting this in, your body has to do something with it. So Corey said, pees it out, stores it, or just then it just spills into your blood where there's nowhere else to put it. So um,
Let's get
yeah,
back to
yeah,
get back to this process. All right, you mentioned
yeah,
we were at storage tank. We got sidetracked with the Cory quiz here on the amount of sugar in
yeah.
the blood. So
So yeah, obviously control the input, right? That's where people cutting out sugar and carbs like right away, that's like
yeah,
you're basically being poisoned. And then you can help the output. So you can just give it time. There's really two things that make it go down.
Uh,
Time, so fasting, and movement. Those are the two things that really start to empty the tank, so to speak.
and that's what you would draw for your humans you take care of.
Yeah, for the humans I take care of. Because
Yes.
so yeah, does that help to give you like a visual at all,
Well,
Corey?
yes, it does. So you have a storage tank that gets overfilled, and that storage tank in your body is going to be your muscles and somewhat around your liver. And once that is full, the storage tank is full, and so sugar spills out of your storage tank into your bloodstream, and then you have diabetes. And you touched on a couple things we could do to start lowering it. We're going to get a little bit more in depth in the next episode on how we can do that. So
Yeah.
we hope that this episode helped to define a little bit about kind of know your enemy, right? This is type 2 diabetes. This is what you want to defeat. This is what you want to put in remission. So we have insulin resistance. We have our storage tank metaphor. We learned about some of the number cutoffs. And then we're going to get into some of the ways we can start reversing it. So, Brian, take us home. Thank you for visualizing that. Any final words for our fine human listeners, unless you're listening with your dog, in which case we don't speak dog. But
No, just one last thing, because the insulin resistance we talk about what causes it, and it's body fat. So too much fat around your organs, around in your muscles, that's what's causing it. So that's really are going to be our primary target here is to reduce body fat, specifically visceral body fat. So we'll get into that in the next episode. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Now go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And you can join us on the journey and roadmap to remission.